Great rewards don't wait, so why should you? Through the Invigor Book and Buy Grower program, you could earn a $30 per bag rebate when you book all of your Invigor hybrid canola by November 14th. Talk to your retailer. Terms and conditions apply.
What would be a Tuesday without some tariff talk? And we had some big news at the end of last week into the weekend, and that is appeals court has rejected the use of the IEEPA tariffs by the Trump administration. But I guess this story and this saga is not over. Where we go next and what does it mean? Joining us is DC policy analyst and also from Wiesemeyer's Perspective podcast, it is Jim Wiesemeyer. Jim, how are we doing?
Pretty good. And as you said, we always have tariff news. And that was a big one, at least for now, on August 30th, when that U.S. Court of Appeals, it was in the federal circuit, they issued the 7-4 decision against Trump's use of most tariffs. But here was one key. They allowed the collections, the tariff revenue, to continue until October 14th. Now, the White House has already said it will appeal this case all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that raises all sorts of additional questions. When will they hear it? I was told they could hear the case probably at the earliest, early 2026. So you'll see the extension of these tariffs for quite some time.
Okay, so the administration can continue to use these tariffs until it's heard by the Supreme Court, or will there be a gap where they can't be?
I don't think there'll be a gap where they can't be. The administration, in its filing eventually with the Supreme Court, they'll ask for an extension and will very likely get it. And this whole case now revolves around whether or not I'm going to focus on the Supreme Court
Yeah.
because the Court of Appeals was a 7-4, and that tells you there was some dissent, obviously, within that. But the Supreme Court, conservative tilted now, uh, usually doesn't like to go against the executive branch regarding foreign policy and so-called emergencies, national security. So that's what the White House is counting on. The others, the ones who oppose this, say these tariffs were unlawful. Because it doesn't, the language doesn't give the president the authority to invoke tariffs of this nature without Congress's approval.
So, of course, when we say IEEPA, just to back up a second, this is the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. This is powers granted by Congress to the president to act in national interest. And this administration is very good at this, finding a little bit of a crack and busting through with a semi tractor trailer. So, do we expect to hear any voices out of Congress at this point? They've been kind of quiet and silent.
Well, the Democrats for sure will come out and favor the court ruling because they'll say it doesn't authorize tariffs. Congress has clear power over trade policy, even though they haven't done anything for a decade or so. And they'll cite the so-called major questions doctrine that bars such unilateral action. The White House and those favoring, including some Republicans, not all though, says that the IEEPA grants broad flexibility to the president in addressing foreign threats. Now, they say tariffs are a common regulatory tool that can be used under emergency powers. So there's the line of arguments. And I noticed the major dissenter who led in the circuit court, Toronto was his name, he said nothing in that underlying IEEPA suggests that Congress intended to withhold tariffs from the presidential tools to address foreign threats. But this has market significance. You're seeing it in the bond market, Sean, on it, because they just assumed that the tariffs would go on, and that lessened the need for these bond releases. So it could have an interest rate development if the Supreme Court would rule against the White House on that one, because we've got a chunk of change coming here in tax revenues. 28 billion alone for the month of July, and then other questions is when the Supreme Court rules, will it be a split ruling? Will they okay the tariffs in place until the date they ruled, or will it be retroactive? Those are all unknown questions right now, or unknown answers, I should say.
Yeah, and just to connect some dots for the audience here, this is why we've heard the president talk about fentanyl crossing so much. It's that is much to serve the justification of the use of the IEEPA tariffs on countries like Canada and Mexico, although they've been more sheltered from this than other countries like the UK and the EU and Japan and others. This has been a big part of the Trump negotiating strategy.
Initially, it was because of Mexico and Canada. I think it loses a little argument as you go around the world on that one. And there was an interesting editorial or opinion piece, I should say, in the Wall Street Journal written by Jonathan Adler, professor of William and Mary Law School, and he warned against assuming the Supreme Court will strike down Trump's contested tariff regime, despite these court defeats. He noted the 7-4 ruling, but he said under the current doctrine, the case could go either way. He said that the IEEPA's grant of power to regulate imports allows tariffs. So he also cited Justice Brett Kavanaugh's recent concurrence, where he emphasized that the major questions canon that I mentioned before had not been applied by the court in national security or foreign policy context. So there is your key. If the Supreme Court hangs on this, he did it because of national security or foreign policy context, then they'll side with the president. So I think it's up in the air, frankly.
Yeah, one piece I was reading this morning, one of the concerns is, okay, if and I'm speaking as if I was in the Oval Office, if we can't go about it with these reciprocal tariffs through IEEPA, we'll take some other means on, we'll up the ante on things like steel and aluminum on some of the countries, which definitely has a negative impact on a country like Canada for sure.
Oh, he has the White House has a host of other tools they can use. By no means are these tariffs going to go away. They just won't be as easy to do. But they have some things in their trade policy toolbox. I mention that all the time in my speeches. It's just not as accelerated in that vanguard. And there's an ag component of this as well, because the as this tariff revenue comes in, I mean, it's going to be billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars if they remain. The White House can use it for all sorts of purposes as far as agriculture. Nobody's telling me that now, but they could actually tap that for trade-related payments to the ag sector. Now, USDA also has the Commodity Credit Corporation that they've used in the past for that, but USDA already gets 35% of tariff revenue. It runs a fiscal year behind. So we get a number of tariff revenues despite this recent trade policy actions by Trump. So there's a lot of importance to this topic relative to funding various government programs and the debt.
Well, what continues is the uncertainty. And from a company perspective, whether you're importing or exporting, you're trying to sort out, okay, what does this landscape actually look like? And we continue to live in this world of like, do I ship today or do I ship in 2 weeks? And mainly that decision's around what the tariffs are, and of course the lawyers always win. And the amount of lawyers writing text into contracts to try to sort out some of this, to allude to whatever the future may be from a tariff perspective, they're doing quite well. The uncertainty continues.
Well, look at what it means to ongoing trade policy talks with the U.S. and other countries, especially India. what do they do if they think that this thing's going to eventually come down and rule against Trump? Why would you want to negotiate uh, further? Further gives to your country's products. So, yeah, this has put a stall, I would say, in the number of negotiations with key countries. But again, even if the Supreme Court rules against the White House, what is in their ruling? Again, regarding, do they say existing trade agreements in place? I'm not saying they will or won't, but that's a question. And relative to the tariff revenues, maybe only having to pay them back for those countries or companies who sue to get the income. That's why the administration has been reticent to utilize any of this funding to date, because they wanted this finally decided on by the Supreme Court, and we'll get it eventually.
And also questions about the trade deals that have been struck already, the UK, Japan, a few others, where what does that mean for those agreements? Because the IEEPA was used as the leverage point. You got to think in some of those cases, those countries are being like, okay, does this change the landscape? And do we go back to the table to renegotiate? Or does that just put us in some sort of a worse situation? That's kind of an unknown at this point as well.
All fair questions. It could be with all the stuff that we've talked about and written about since April 2nd, the Trade Liberation Day in the United States faces Trump. You could just say never mind. And go
Yeah.
back, go back to day one. And this is what the White House is telling the courts, like saying, "Hey, you're going to cause significant damage to U.S. foreign and trade policy if you do this." There is the argument right there.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Jim, what do you make of, speaking of India, what do you make of President Xi and Modi and Putin having a bit of a love-in?
A big news, I think, is the changing world, and I think the power structure. Yeah, frankly, I never like. I'm a student of history. I was a history major actually in college, and when you see meetings like this, frequently, again, I'm not predicting, I'm just observing perspectives. This is what you get before a major confrontation when you get countries like this together. And now North Korea is joining some of the talks. Iran probably will. But this shows you the power structure changes that are going on. And I mean, we're living history, so to speak, in this, and how it's going to finish. That sets up a major importance later this year, hopefully, when President Trump meets with Xi Jinping, and to see whether or not they can get a cooler relationship going, and maybe a new trade agreement that's bonded by a signed memorandum rather than just a dictate that won't hold up. And that would be phase two of a trade agreement, hopefully with a better enforcement mechanism. So we've got trade policy between now and the end of the year is still going to be probably the top and front and center topic.
Yeah, three of them are holding hands. All that was missing was like a live shot of them, Xi versus Putin playing pickleball or something like that.
Riding in cars together, I saw
Yeah.
all that. Clear signals to President Trump, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. Very interesting times indeed. We've been talking to Jim Wiesemeyer, DC policy analyst, also with Wiesemeyer's Perspectives podcast, which you can get wherever you get your podcast. And you can also hear him here on Real Ag Radio. Hey, Jim, thanks a lot for joining me here today. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Sean.